Today's episode of the Counselling Tutor Podcast is sponsored by Web Healer. You're a counsellor in private practice and you need a website, or you've got an existing website which you need help with. Web Healer are offering Counselling Tutor Podcast listeners, that's you, £100 off the cost of a website design and build. Now, Web Healer specialise in websites for counsellors and psychotherapists. It's what they do. And the Web Healer team provide a completely non-technical, done-for-you solution, leaving you to focus your time on your clients. Operating for 20 years, Web Healer are a trusted resource amongst counsellors when it comes to getting your practice online. So get the package details and claim your £100 off coupon for your new website by going to counsellingtutor.com/website. That's counsellingtutor.com/website.
Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for counsellors, psychotherapists, and counselling students. Here are your hosts, Rory Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hi, I'm Rory, and with me, as always, is Ken. How are you, Ken?
I'm exceptionally well. I'm so delighted to be back after the academic break here in the UK, and we are so grateful that you've joined us for the Counselling Tutor Podcast, episode 271. And we've got 3 stops on our journey today. But before we go into those 3 stops on our journey, I wonder, Rory, if anybody noticed that the beginning of the podcast is slightly different today.
Yes, we've got a new tune, and and really it reflects, I guess, a regeneration of the podcast in the light of the fact that that the world of counselling and psychotherapy is changing. It's changing really, really rapidly, and we, myself and Ken, we want to keep up with that, to keep up with you, to make sure that we're giving you a really, really good experience of what the world of counselling and psychotherapy is now, because the world is changing, and I think it's changing really, really quickly.
Yes, and a slight change in our lineup for you as well. We're going to be stopping at those 3 stops as mentioned, and the first stop is called Student Services. This is where we're going to be delving into the world of being a student, studying counselling, what's happening, and supporting you along that journey. We then go into a brand new section called Ethical Sustainable Practice. This is for our qualified colleagues, and it's looking at the day-to-day running of a practice, starting a practice, and ethically running a practice which is sustainable for yourself. And then we're going to end today's episode with our old favorite Practice Matters that will never leave us. It's the CPD section of the Counselling Tutor podcast, and today we're going to be looking at disability and therapy. But let's dive into those student services, Rory. There's a new kid on the block. Well, it's not really new, but it's showing itself as new. It's calling itself AI. Lots of news about ChatGPT, lots of fear. It's going to take over the world. Lots of people saying it's really good. But as a student, do I use it? Don't I use it? What is the word on the ground, Rory?
Well, it's an interesting one. And, over the summer, Ken and myself have spent a huge amount of time speaking to awarding bodies, looking at government documents, trying to get a sense from educators of how AI is used. I've spent a lot of time with American tutors who seem to have a kind of handle on the use of AI. And one of the messages is that AI is not going to go away. It is here to stay. And how we engage with it, and more to the point, how we engage with it ethically, is going to be an ongoing debate. And as Ken has said, there's huge amounts of newsprint been put to AI to say it's going to do everything from destroy the world to destroy education. But actually, we see it as a very positive tool to help with critical thinking, to expand people's learning, and to support differentiation, to support different levels of understanding. And if it's used correctly, it will be, we think, a fantastic tool to aid the development of counselling and psychotherapy in more ways, I suspect, than we know.
Yeah, and you said a very key phrase there, Rory. If it is used correctly.
Yes.
And like anything, I mean, AI or the new technologies that we're seeing are really just technologies. They're neither good nor bad. It is the application. How is it used? So if as a student you go to something like ChatGPT and you ask it for facts or information for your assignment, then that is kind of an unethical use of AI. Because you get basically asking AI to do the study work for you. But there are ethical ways. And I think this is the focus here. Ethical ways of using these tools. So you're not looking for facts and you're not looking for the information for your assignments. You can use it to help you and support you within your studies, but without kind of letting it do the heavy lifting, as it were.
Yes, I mean, I think it would be easy to think, you're struggling with an assignment and you just go into the AI and say, well, literally write my assignment. The difficulty with that is, of course, it's not your work. You're not bringing yourself and your intellect to that piece of work. And also, ultimately, it's not going to be one that gets a pass, because tutors do know if AI has been used to write assignments. What AI, I think, is really, really good for is for you to be able to restructure information in a way that you're able to engage with it. So, for instance, you may have some notes, and you may pop that into AI and say, put these notes into order of importance. That's just a very, very simple one. And as such, you'd have a more structured way of looking at your notes. It's a new technology, and one I think that's going to take a little time for people to get used to. But as Ken said, used ethically, used with thought, it's going to be, I think, a huge benefit to anyone who learns, and especially in the world of counselling and psychotherapy.
And to kind of give you an update of what we're doing here in Counselling Tutor with regards to ethical use of AI in counselling studies and counselling application, is we are calling together those that have a say, awarding bodies, ethical bodies, universities, and we're putting together a board of stakeholders, I guess, to have a look at AI and the ethical usage. Counselling Tutor has been in the process of building a course for tutors on ethical use of AI for tutors and how tutors can explain this through to learners, so that we're not misusing the AI, but using it in a way that enhances and deepens and brings richness to the learning. And we also are starting our new academic year, with an open lecture which is about ethical AI usage in your counselling studies. And we'll give you more information on that just towards the end of this section. If you're interested in that, you can register for that and you can come along and you can enjoy that lecture and have a look at what we're doing. But just as an example, Rory, you mentioned you might use it for restructuring information you have. You can also use AI, point it to a handout that maybe is given to you by your university, your college, your learning institution, and you can ask it to summarize that. So you've got the handout, it's your work, it's been handed to you for your learning, but it may be that you want to make summarized notes for when you do your revision. AI is really good at that, and we will be showing you how to do that in the open lecture that we'll be having, and that will be starting in September, early September. And then another really good use for ChatGPT is using it to summarize something like a government paper. So if you took the Equalities Act of 2010, that is quite a lengthy document. We refer to it often in counselling studies for good reason. And you might point AI to that and ask it to pull out the most important points and to summarize. Of course, you would reference that against the original document. So you're not kind of getting it to work out the information for you. You hold the information already. You say, look at this act and just pull out the main points, and it can really summarize, and it's really good for that. It's also great for revision work. If you've got handouts and work and notes that you hold that are yours as the student, well, you can use AI to create a quiz for you to check your knowledge on that. You can feed in your notes and say, make a quiz at level 4 standard, and I will kind of answer that, and it will tell you whether you are right or wrong on that. So that's very useful for revision. You can do that with your peers. So lots to come. We'll be teaching all of that in that open lecture, which is beginning of September, Rory.
Absolutely, and I think that's a must attend to lecture, because AI is going to be something that I think every student who goes back to their learning institution is going to hear about from either their peers or their tutors, and also it's so much now in the news, and I think that the ethical use of it and developing a skill set to be able to harness the power of AI, but doing it in a way that, as Ken said, interrogates your own work and gives you different questions to look at. I mean, Ken talked about summarizing. You could also make flashcards. So you could have flashcards, and you could have the name of a theory on one side, and on the other side you could have a more detailed explanation. So there's a lot of power in AI, and I think that over the next few months, and certainly into the coming years, we will be helping you be able to engage with AI to increase your ability to delve deeper into the topics that you're studying.
I think that's the fun, and that's the exciting part of it. But I also recognize, Roy, and I think you and I have spoken about this, where there is a lack of understanding of something, then the void that is left with that lack of understanding can be filled with fear, uncertainty, and I think there's a lot about that around at the moment. So when we look at AI, it kind of shows itself to be this brand new technology that's just sprung itself on us. And in reality, from our research, the word AI was coined in the 1950s, the end of the 1950s. They've been working on this concept of AI. And the truth is, you're probably using AI in your day-to-day life anyway. It's just not called AI, so you don't see it. So if you've ever gone onto Google and done a Google search, well, Google runs an algorithm. That algorithm is actually biased towards what you have searched previously. So it's kind of specially biased towards you to give you the best search results for your given phrase. And that has AI running it. If you see a targeted ad on social media platform, chances are that is an AI algorithm that is kind of choosing that advert and saying that's a good fit for you. And then we use AI if we use any kind of speaker system, the smart speakers like Alexa, that is an AI, or the Google Assistant, an AI assistant. It's run by AI, as is Siri. And of course, if you stream like on Spotify or on Netflix, and it's got that little section that says recommendations for you, how does it know what to recommend for you? Because it's different to someone else. Well, that is an AI algorithm. So nothing is new. We've been using it for many, many years. And I think the reason it's become news headlines and AI being kind of the word of the time as we're recording this is because of the launch of ChatGPT. And that launched in December of 2022. So that, from the time that we're making this actual episode, is only a few short months ago. So this is brand new. So I think the good news is you haven't got a lot of learning and catching up to do. This is all very new, and it's very new for everybody. It's very new for your tutors. It's very new for students. So you're getting in on the ground level. And if we can start with those, bringing the ethics that we hold so close and so dear and that keep counseling that protected environment, and we apply that to our use of AI, I think that it can really serve. It can serve us within our studies because it can kind of give us a deeper, more meaningful learning experience. But I see that AI will form part of how we might serve our clients in the future. Now, I do not mean by any means that AI is going to replace counselors and that eventually clients are going to be speaking to a machine. This is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about maybe AI used to smoothen your practice, to help you invoice and send invoices and track if they're done, or keep your books and running the business side of your practice and checking on appointments. So there are new tools coming out each and every single day. So it is a very exciting time, but at the same time, maybe for some, a little bit scary, Rory. And I think that's the reason why we made the tutor course, and that's the reason why we're hoping that you'll join us for that ethical AI usage in your counselling studies that we're starting in September.
Yeah, it's interesting you say how scary AI is. Yeah, when it's used all the time. I went out last night for something to eat with my wife, and they had some tunes on in the restaurant. And my wife said, "Oh, I'd love to know what that tune is." So I used Shazam, and I just clicked on it, and within a few seconds, Shazam told me what the tune was. And then we used Google Maps in my car to find me the way home. I just said, "Hey Siri, navigate to home," and they got me the best route to home. So we use friendly AI. Their AI is a servant, not a master. I think that's the thing to get over. It's something that works with us and makes our life easier. And within the realm of counselling, as Ken has alluded to, I think that in a few years, things like assessments may very well be done with AI. Things like, we do core 10 assessments sometimes, and there's a lot of other assessments that are used in counselling. It could be used to make them a lot more smarter, to make them more accurate, to tailor themselves to the client. So we as therapists can have a better understanding of where the client is, understand them at a far deeper level, and be able to work with them, having taken that information on board. So I think the future with AI, certainly in our profession, is going to be really exciting and in fact transformational.
One of the most common searches on Google related to AI is, will AI replace ... Now insert into ... wherever your profession is. So will AI replace copywriters? Will AI replace counselors? Is maybe the thought that we might have. And for me, the answer is no. And the reason for that is what AI is and how it works is that AI is really just a massive database of information. So if you take something like ChatGPT, it was trained on all of the text on the internet. Now, that's a lot of text. That's a lot of stuff. That's every website that is readable, every paper, every academic paper. It holds all of that information. Some of it true and some of it not true, if you think about it, because the internet's a very large place and you can basically post anything on the internet. So it's learned the good and the bad, the true and the not so true. But really, all it is a massive database that you're asking a question, it's going through that database and using some very smart technology, bringing you an answer. So it is a knowledge-based search. So an example of where that worked quite effectively was in a law firm. A law firm recognized that all law is based on the books of law and the information that is in those books and the precedents and all of the case precedents that have been set. And there are millions of documents related to law. Well, something like AI is very effective at going through all of that. So you can ask it a law question. It can go and look, these are the facts, and come back and give you some information. So that is an information-based search. However, when we're speaking about counseling is about emotion. It's about emotion and it's about nuance. It's about relationship. It's about trust. It's about empathy. It's about relational depth. It is not about information. Yes, there's information. There's the theory that underpins that. But at the very heart of counseling, it is two humans in communication with one another, using empathy and that shared understanding of emotion, knowing what it feels like. So for me to be empathic when you're explaining something, I need to be able to, at some level, understand what that feeling is. And I can't see AI or computers being able to get to that level. So I think that it's like hairdressers. I think they won't be taken over by AI either. But I think we're pretty protected from being taken over by AI. And I think that is a fear of some. But I do see AI creeping into how we might run our practice. Information gathering, like you say, Rory, of doing an assessment where it is a match of information against maybe risk criteria, or gauging or tracking how the person is progressing through therapy. It might be very smart. And we do know from our conversations that Rory's mentioning assessments. Well, we know that this is being built at the moment. There are those out there at the moment looking at the counselling assessments and looking at how that can be used with this new technology in better service. And I think that's what this is about. Ethical use of AI in better service, including in our studies.
Yes, absolutely. And I think as the year unfolds, we will see a more definite direction in how you use AI in your studies and how it will support you. It is, in fact, I think it's fair to say it's so new that learning institutions, awarding bodies, universities are really debating this now. But I think the message to take away is AI is here. It's not going anywhere. And how we engage with it, it's a tool like anything else. You know, I could use the analogy of a knife. I use a knife all the time to cut food, to cut into cardboard boxes to get goods out. A fairly benign but very handy tool. But you could also use a knife to do some serious damage to someone. It's not the tool, it's how it's used. And I think that the way we'll adapt to using AI is think of more creative ways of using it in a way that is productive and enhances our knowledge and, supports our clients.
And that's what our lecture's about. And if you're interested in ethical use of AI in your counselling studies, our lecture from Counselling Tutor, it's free to attend. You can get more information on that by making sure that you are on the Counselling Tutor mailing list. If you're on the mailing list, then you'll get the invite in your inbox. If you're not on our mailing list, just go to counsellingtutor.com. You can join our mailing list right there on that page, and then you'll get all of the updates and all of the invites to the open lectures that we run, and we do run a few every single year. So that is student services. We'll definitely be revisiting this topic from time to time as the new tools become available, and as more information becomes available from Ofqual and from the awarding bodies. We will be sharing what the thinking is with you so that you are aware of what ethical use of AI looks like in your counselling studies. Student Services is sponsored by Counselling Skills Academy. Have you ever wondered if you're using counselling skills effectively? Confidentiality means we rarely see skills used by others, so it's no wonder that so many students say they lack confidence in their counselling skills. That's why I built Counselling Skills Academy. Counselling Skills Academy is an online course that you can do at your own pace. It will give you the skills competence and confidence to know that you're using your skills most effectively. You will see real counselling skills used by a counsellor in real life sessions, covering everything from how risk is assessed right through to working towards an appropriate ending. Visit counsellingskillsacademy.com to learn more and to claim your counselling tutor discount. That's counsellingskillsacademy.com. So moving on from our student services and going into our ethical, sustainable practice. And I think, this section is so important. In a world where it's becoming more and more difficult to get your counselling practice noticed, to find clients, and why is it becoming more difficult? Well, there's new technologies that are coming that kind of make it quite crowded in the counselling space. One of those technologies is the kind of client counselor matching services. So it used to be directories where they would go on and you'd have yourself on a directory and people could see you. But now there are new client matching services where it's kind of somebody will look for a therapist and there'll be this offer that we will find you a therapist, and it's technology run. And it makes it just more difficult for the counsellor to market their service ethically and to run a sustainable practice. Sustainable being that you can kind of look after yourself, your family, and have a lifestyle for the work you've put in to become a counsellor and for the service that you deliver to clients. And there's two words there. The one is ethical, the other one is sustainable. And I think what we're looking at today, Rory, is kind of on the ethical side when we're saying handling disagreements with colleagues, because they come up and they can affect our relationships with clients as well. So ethically, we need to pay attention to disagreements with colleagues and how they are handled.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, one of the wonders of our profession is that we should be surrounded by critical friends. I think because counselling is such a individual practice, we sit in the room with a client. If we're doing couples, we may sit in the room with two clients, but generally speaking, we work alone. And I think it's very useful to surround yourself with people who may be critical friends. And sometimes if you're being critiqued by another therapist, it's useful to have a think about how we handle those times when we're in disagreement. I've certainly been in disagreement with therapists and then with me over a number of years on certain issues. And it's the way that we handle it, the way we handle ourselves and what we look to, I guess, enhance our learning, but also work in a collegial way. Our colleagues are, they're working in the same environment as we are. To use a military term, I guess they're brothers and sisters in arms, really. They're our colleagues. So when we look at someone who disagrees on an issue, I guess the first thing to do is to think about what the basis is of that disagreement. Do they live in ethics? When someone says something's unethical, well, I think the question there becomes, well, what part of the ethical framework that you abide to? And most of the ethical frameworks now in the UK, pretty much the same. The wording may vary, but they're pretty much the same. What is it exactly that's in the ethical framework where I may be bumping into it? And also, in terms of the law, we have to work within the law. So those are two areas where we may have disagreements. Certainly, the way to handle it is to ask the person what they disagree about, what they see in your practice they believe they disagree with, and then go away and reflect and look at the areas of either ethics or law that they're talked about. But you have to frame it in that way. I think just forming an opinion and saying, well, that's unethical, isn't really helpful. I think you have to say it's unethical, or you shouldn't be doing that because, and then back that up with information and theory. And I think it was Tim Bond who wrote in the very famous book about counselling ethics that sits on every university and college shelf and a lot of students' shelves, is that just because someone disagrees with you doesn't make it unethical. Just because someone does something in a slightly different way doesn't automatically make it unethical. What we have to do is, if we believe that someone's doing something incorrect, we have to look at the base reasons of that. Is it ethics? Is it law? Is it something else? And we have to be very thoughtful before we go and challenge clients. Now, before we challenge our colleagues. Now, in ethical frameworks, we do have a duty of candor. So if someone sees someone doing something they believe is wrong, we have a duty under the ethical framework to challenge them. But we need to challenge them with clear information, Ken.
Yeah. And it's really interesting, sometimes that we all have differing opinions, and Rory within Counselling Tutor, our team on regular occasions will disagree with one another, and that is healthy because it promotes thinking, it promotes looking at it from a different perspective and re-examining your own point of view. It's interesting you speak about candor because there's two sides, aren't there? We're speaking about a disagreement, so it would infer that somebody has said something, or you have said something to somebody to cause that disagreement. And when it is based in opinion, like, I don't think you should have a red counselling door because red is not a great color to greet a client. Well, then, what you do on that and how you think about that is very different to have you considered with your practice being up 3 flights of stairs, how those with mobility challenges may enter your practice. That's a very different kind of challenge, and it requires a different thinking level. And I think that's a great place to start, is kind of identifying what is the information, if you are the recipient of this, that you are hearing. And Tim Bond, you mentioned Tim Bond, and of course he famously put together the ethical problem-solving matrix, which is available on the Counselling Tutor website. Go to counsellingtutor.com, pop in ethical a problem-solving matrix, and that'll come up over there. And it's a set of questions that you would go through to ask yourself to examine that. But I think even to get to the point of examining, we need to be open. We need to be open to the input of others and not too defensive and closed down. If we're getting that critical friend giving us feedback, giving us guidance, giving us information, if we are open to that and think about that and explore and examine that in the correct ways, that's a great place to start. And of course, if we find maybe there is an area, and we're called on this in the frameworks, we need to an area that we need to look at more deeply. We need to make sure that we're taking any immediate action to prevent or limit any harm to a client, first and foremost. Repairing any harm caused if we have maybe done something that's been pointed out to us by a colleague or somebody else. Offering an apology where appropriate. And this includes to colleagues, saying, what, I got that wrong. I'm so grateful for your guidance on that, and I apologize for how I may have acted or reacted within that moment. Notifying and discussing with our own supervisor. I know from myself, sometimes when I receive feedback, my initial gut reaction is back from many years ago, before all the personal development. It still lives within me, and it say, who are you to tell me? And it goes into this like mindset that I don't particularly like within myself, but I know that it still exists there. And having a colleague like a supervisor that you can go in and speak about it gives another outlet where you can discuss it and have a think about that before going back to that colleague and continuing that conversation, I guess.
Absolutely. You picked up on an important point there. If you have a difficulty with a colleague, take advice from either your supervisor or someone who's not connected with that colleague, and another professional. And I always think it's useful to write down very clearly what the issue is, and write it down, and then just put it to one side, and then come back to it and have a look. And when you reread it again, is it still as pressing? And if it is, speak to your supervisor. And I think some of the difficulties that people have is that I think there's a lot of folklore in counselling that we think we must abide by. I saw a debate about the therapeutic hour. Should it be 50 minutes? Should it be an hour? Should it be half an hour? Now, sometimes if you're working with clients who are, have experienced extreme trauma, then you may only be able to handle half an hour at a time, as long as that's contracted and they understand that and that works. But that's fine. But the disagreement was, you should be offering them an hour. It's always an hour. Well, it's what the client needs and your own professional view of it. So I think that before being kind of thinking that something is unethical, may be worth just kind of taking a bit of retrospective thought for yourself and saying, actually, is this challenging something I believe to be true? And if so, is that belief accurate? I think a lot of disagreements can be halted before they get anywhere by just having a bit of a thought about, is this coming from me and my worldview, and is it correctly informed? And it's interesting. There's a lot of discussion around disagreements and handling disagreements on our Facebook group.
Yes.
And if you're not a member of our Facebook group, if you go to Facebook and type in Counselling Tutor, you'll find us there, and you can join our community, which on the whole are very collegial, very friendly, very helpful. But sometimes people post, I'm struggling with this, and people will give a view. But I think the point of this is that we're professional people. As therapists, we're professional people. And when we have issues with someone else's practice, we should handle it in a professional way with the correct information. I think that's so important. It shouldn't be personal opinion. It should be based in wherever that accuracy is, be it the ethical framework, whether it's being in law, whether it's, being in with the modality of therapy. Really, really important. And in my experience, usually a lot of disagreements are miscommunication, where once you've sat down and you've got clear communication and understand what's going on, it's actually a bit of a different story.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really important point, is that miscommunication. And be no secret to those listeners that are regular listeners to the Counselling Tutor podcast, both Rory and myself are neurodivergent. And I find myself often speaking or saying something and finding that I find it really difficult to put over my intention of what I feel and what I really mean, that another person can understand it. And the other side of the coin is I often find myself misunderstanding someone else's motivation or intention for what they're putting over. And that miscommunication, where there is a break in the actual meaning, can lead to degradation of a relationship. And what we're trying to focus on here is this: disagreements, they come up. It's how we handle them professionally, but it's when they are not handled, when they are left to kind of grow, they can get out of hand and they can cause damage to our clients. And I'm thinking now within an agency setting, this is just an example where you may have squabbling in amongst the counsellors over whatever it may be. It can be even how the office is run. It doesn't have to be client facing. There can be a mood. There can be a feeling around that, and we want to get rid of that. So we work in an enjoyable place, a light place. We're all colleagues, and that disagreement really, really important. So I think what's important here is Rory's made you a handout on handling disagreements with colleagues. We always give you the step-by-steps. Thanks for this, Rory. And if you want to get the handout, it's a PDF. It kind of goes over, it's got references into ethical frameworks, also references Tim Bomb's problem-solving matrix as well. You can get that by going to our website, that's counsellingtutor.com. Click on the podcast tab. That'll take you to all of our past podcasts. And you're looking for episode 271. Find that episode right there in the page. You can just download it. There's no charge for that at all. You can have it with absolute pleasure. It's a beautifully made handout, handling disagreements with colleagues.
Yeah, absolutely. So go and get that handout. And why don't you share it about, if you've got other colleagues who haven't heard of the Counselling Tutor website or haven't got the handout, point them to it, and I'm sure it's going to be really, really useful.
So moving on to our practice matters, this is the CPD section of the Counselling Tutor podcast. And today, Rory, you met up with Melanie and you were speaking about disability and therapy.
Yes, absolutely. There's a lot of discussion, and rightly so, about equality and diversity within therapy. And one of the areas that sometimes I think gets overlooked is disability. And I was delighted to meet up with Melanie Halacre, who has done an absolutely fabulous lecture on working with disability in the therapy room for our Counsellor CSR library, our student library, and also our CPD library for qualified colleagues. And she talks about disability and therapy, and touches on some of the issues that she raised in her lecture. And this is what she had to say.
Practice Matters is proudly sponsored by the Counsellor CPD Library. To access top quality, relevant continuing professional development for your practice that you can do at a time that suits you, and all for less than the price of a cup of coffee, visit counsellingtutor.com.
There's a lot of talk about diversity in counselling, and perhaps one of the lesser talked about subjects is disability, which is why I'm delighted to be interviewing Mel Halacre from spokespeople.org, who is a pioneer and a activist, I guess would be the correct term, in bringing disability awareness to counsellors. She's done a fantastic lecture for our Counsellor CPD and CSR library. So it's my great pleasure to welcome Mel Halacre. Mel, you're so welcome.
Thank you, Rory. And it's always a bit uncomfortable to hear such glowing praise, but thank you.
Well, I think it's the truth, and you and your spokespeople are pioneering in trying to push disability awareness in terms of all aspects, I expect, but certainly in counselling, which I guess brings me to my first question. Why is it important to explore disability and therapy, and why is it also, I guess, important that people engage in CPD around that?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Rory, and I think there's lots of aspects to that. I think when we think about equality and diversity, and we think about minority groups, we're thinking about people that are different from ourselves. And, I think it's really important that we remember, for all equality and diversity really, is that we have a relationship with that diversity, whether or not we are a member of that group or not. So we all have a relationship with disability, regardless of whether we have any disabled clients, regardless of whether we or any family members are disabled. We still have, thoughts and ideas around disability. And, one of the more important sides of kind of talking about diversity and this word inclusion, which is now being debated, is inclusion the right word or not? But, when we want to help minority groups, we are kind of being an activist, and we kind of need to be proactive in saying, well, why aren't we seeing this amount of disabled people in our practice? So we can be proactive at looking at why we're not seeing them and what we could do about it. Now, certainly, I don't know, Rory, what your training was like when you trained, but when I trained as a therapist, which was, I finished in 2009, I think we did about 2 hours on disability on our whole training course. And if we look at, the resources that Spokespeople offers, so our training modules at the moment, we have got about 13 hours already, and we're just scratching the surface. That's woefully inadequate, the 2 hours of training that we had on my counselling course. What was yours like, Rory?
Well, to be honest, I don't think we got 2 hours, if I remember. And what I would say, as a former lecturer of counselling, we had, I think, a 30-hour block of training for equality, and I seem to remember that we had to get the whole panoply of diversity in there. And I always thought that 30 hours wasn't really enough, because there's so much when we talk about that much debated word inclusion and diversity. There are so many diverse groups, and there's so many nuances within that it was very difficult to get a sense, a deep sense. So, external training, I think, is so important in this field.
Yeah, definitely. And it is the reality that the training courses are so jam-packed. It is hard to fit it in and to do it justice, I guess, really. So, I suppose we're really passionate about saying you can be proactive and you can say, okay, if I'm not seeing 20% of my clients are disabled, because if we look at the population, about 20%, if we're not seeing that in our client group, why aren't we seeing that? When we know that there are so many groups out there that are, what's the word I'm looking for, that are secluded from a lot of services, we can kind of be proactive in saying, well, how can we include them? How can we offer a place of belonging? And there's lots of ways that we can do that. But yeah, it's the challenge is to get people to attend training and to feel as if they want to attend and as if they're going to get something personally out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that brings me to my second question. If I think about my practice experience, I've seen very, very few people with a visible, and I'll use the term, I want to make it really clear, visible disability. And there's lots of hidden disabilities, and I understand that. Is there a difficulty for disabled people accessing therapy? Is that something you'd see?
Yes, so that's really common, and I guess that's how clients, find us after many years of struggling. So there can be issues around finding physically accessible venues, but there's also there was that case, was it 2019? Ashley Cox, who wrote in the Metro and also for the ACP that he'd been turned down by 8 therapists and he was blind. So there was no physical access issues for him. But I since know that a colleague of mine has been in touch with him that is now on over 100. And, I know several other disabled people that are on over 100 contacts that they've tried to make. So we know there is an issue, not just around physical access, but also therapists, I guess, willingness to engage in something that might make them feel awkward or uncomfortable. And certainly, Rory, I think I've shared with you, this is now my famous example where I was asked to attend, a conference to give a lecture on working with disability. And most people had 20 to 30 people in their workshops, and I had 6 people in mind, 2 of whom were disabled, and the other 4 people all had a personal connection to disability through a friend or a family member. And that just shows the reluctance to kind of attend this training. And I took the opportunity to ask the trainees, what made you attend today? And they all kind of said, even, the disabled people that were there, that they had to kind of overcome an awkwardness or discomfort in themselves to attend the training because they knew there were, easier ones out there. So, it's great that you've asked me to do this podcast with you so that I can encourage people, it's okay to feel uncomfortable. But, we ask our clients to go where it's uncomfortable, don't we? We say, let's try and stick with that.
We do, and it's a pity that this isn't a video because my face is absolutely stunned. I can see myself in my monitor, and I had a very stunned face when he said that people were being turned down because they were blind. Do you think that is a outward prejudice, or people who are so unsure of working with disability that they just don't think they're equipped to do it?
I think it can be lots of reasons. I think it's, I don't feel equipped, I don't know how to do it. So because there's a lack of training, equally, I think there's this unconscious process that happens, particularly with disability. And when we talk about denial, so when things make us feel awkward or uncomfortable, it's easier to just push it away. And sometimes I think that's an unconscious process. And I think what therapists who turn these clients down don't realise is that you're maybe the 100th person they've already contacted.
Yes.
And I think when you start to realise that person might have had lots and lots of rejections before you, then you might consider to change how you respond to that disabled person who's inquiring about accessing your service. And then I think there's also the stuff around, reasonable adjustments if people need to work differently. I think as therapists, we're so trained to work in a certain way, stick to the boundaries. And sometimes you have to chuck that aside when you're working with a disabled client and they have different needs. And you have to find a way around that, and you have to maybe be a bit more creative. So I think it can be all of those things why it can be a struggle.
Well, I hope everybody who heard that was as shocked as me. I hope our listeners were as shocked as me. I mean, it's not often you find me speechless, but I am speechless about that. That's terrible. And I think I would take you up on the point of adapting. When I was a student many years ago, worked for a wonderful organisation. And I had a disabled client, a wheelchair user, and they put a lot of adaptions in. What they had to address, and they did, to be fair to them, was their DNA policy, because it was 3 strikes and you're out, which sounds awful, but that's, services operate like that because of capacity and need, And we had to have a, shall we say, a robust conversation regarding why it was important to make exceptions and reasonable adjustments for this client, including preparing the chair. There was a chairlift, and it would get stuck, which was quite embarrassing, I seem to remember. And that had to be rectified. And we've spoken before, and I shared with you when we first met a picture I'd taken outside, shall we say, a set of offices. I'll be discreet here, a set of offices. And it was a wheelie bin with a disabled sticker on it. And when I asked what that was about, they said, "Oh, it was so that people who were disabled knew this was the entrance." They'd stuck a wheelchair, a kind of graphic of someone on a wheelchair on a dustbin. And when I challenged them, they had no conception why that would be offensive. And I said, basically saying wheelchair and rubbish. You're literally saying that.
And I don't know if I said in response, Rory, but that's so common. That's so often our experience in our family, that we have to go through the rubbish, through the back entrance to access anything, or we use a toilet and there's rubbish in there, or, mop buckets. And none of that gives you the message that you feel like you belong or that you're valued. Yeah. And so I think as therapists, we have a really important proactive role, that we could use our websites and how we communicate with the potential customers out there, that we can offer them a different experience from how they usually get treated in society.
Yes, and there's one question that's kind of popped up. We're working remotely today. I'm in Manchester and you're a distance away from me. And I wonder, do you think that the advent of online therapies is going to make it easier for disabled clients? I was just thinking that as we were talking.
Well, and now you're giving away some of the one of the myths we discuss in the lecture, Rory, because we do this. So I don't know whether you want me to answer that or to say people come and watch the lecture and find out more about this this myth of whether online is the way forward or not.
Well, I think as a bit of a teaser, because it really is a good lecture and you shouldn't miss it. Go on, give it away now.
So I guess the long and short of it is, for some people, yes. But for some people, no. There's something around, and that's not just for disability, but anybody who's had a lot of minority experiences of being excluded and made to feel different. There is a lot of value in seeing someone in person, because you can see their whole body language, their whole body, and you can see if what they're saying and what their body is doing matches. Because I think that's really important for that congruence that clients from a minority background, they want to know, they want to feel heard, they want to be believed, and to feel valued. And sometimes if, people might need more time to build that trust than they might need in person. And also we talk a lot in our training about, there is a higher prevalence of trauma, and equally, so when people have experienced a lot of trauma, and again, that's common across many minority groups, in-person support can sometimes be more healing or more helpful. Yes. So that's the long and short of that one.
Well, I'm sure that you expand on that in your lecture. So that really neatly brings me to what do you cover in the lecture? What does the lecture cover, Mel?
So we call it the myths of disability and support, disability and therapy. So I guess it's the things that people have often said to us over the years about working with disabled clients. So, for example, I don't need to do anything because I don't see any disabled clients, in my service, and our response is, well, why? Why are you not seeing them? Or, a common response is, I treat all my clients the same, so I don't need additional training. And that comment comes from a really good place, and we explore in the lecture, why that might not be the case. Or, a common myth is my venue has steps, so I can't do anything about access. So that's some of the myths we explore, and we touch on disability and sex as well, and intersectionality. Am I missing it? I'm sure there's a few others, Rory. Am I missing?
Well, I mean, we don't want to give it all away, Mel, do we? Because this is a really in-depth lecture, and it's quite interesting because we have a huge amount of lectures in the CSR CPD library regarding diversity, but actually, I think I'm right in saying that you're the only person who's approached us to actually make a lecture on disability, and I think that's quite telling, if I'm honest.
Yeah, and equally, there's a lot of challenges for disabled people to become therapists and supervisors and lecturers, and I think that's part of the issue too. We're not seeing it in our profession as much, and so I'm hoping that it encourages more people to approach you, Rory, because I think there's a lot of disabled private practitioners out there doing great work. So I hope they will come forward and offer more training, because it's very much needed. Absolutely.
And if you are interested to find out more about spokespeople and Mel herself and the work she does, if you go to counsellingtutor.com, go to the podcast tab, look for podcast 271. And Mel will supply some links and some information we'll put in the show notes, and of course a link through to the website so that you can have a look and look at more depth, and indeed may even engage in the many training opportunities that you provide, Mel.
Yeah, thank you. And we also have a Facebook page called Disability Psychological Practitioners Network, where people can get free support, and we have other free support on our website as well. So we really just want to encourage people to start thinking about it and to keep that conversation going.
Well, it's been a very insightful 15 or 20 minutes. And I have to say, Mel, it's always a joy. So Mel Halacre, thank you so much for joining us.
Massive thank you to Melanie and to yourself, Rory, for reaching out, for holding those interviews, for bringing us the good stuff. And of course, you mentioned this going into it, Rory, but if you want to hear more about disability and therapy, see the entire lecture that Melanie delivered. If you're a member of our student library, that's the Counselling Study Resource. Log in. It is there. It is waiting for you. If you're a qualified practitioner and a member of our CPD library, log in. It is there waiting for you. Of course, why do we put it in the student and the qualified library build? Because equality, diversity is learning for us all. It is just ongoing professional development for all of us. And of course, if you're not a member of any of our libraries and you want to learn more, go to counsellingtutor.com. All the information is there for you. This has been episode 271 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast.
Yes, our first podcast of the new academic year with a new introduction and a new series of topics. We started off by talking about using AI in your studies. We talked about the brave new world that's going to come along to us and maybe become part of our study and our practice life. We went on to looking at ethical and sustainable practice, handling disagreements with colleagues, and we talked about, the best way and the most collegial ways of engaging with our critical friends and challenging ourselves to see if what people tell us has any accuracy and how we can change our practice. And finally, in Practice Matters, a very important interview with Melanie Halacre, who talks about disability and therapy as such an important issue, and one I think that's sometimes overlooked. And as always, one thing that'll never change: you stay grounded and you stay safe.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode by visiting counsellingtutor.com.